This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome, I'm Phil McKinney. When it comes to the process of generating ideas, the default answer for most innovation teams is to host a brainstorming session. Get 10 of your best and brightest people into a room and have them work as a group to generate as many ideas. Are there other ways to generate ideas that are not dependent on a traditional brainstorming? Yes, and there are literally thousands of these. Now, when I'm talking about brainstorming, I'm assuming that we're talking about brainstorming in the traditional process defined by Alex Osborne back in 1939. And he was the first one to kind of tag it as brainstorming and describe the process. As I said, there are literally thousands of ways to generate ideas. For today's show, I'm going to share with you 5 that I use. Now, I don't use them all the time. I mix them up, but these are approaches, these are tools that I use just to kind of shake it up, change it about a little bit, and also to get teams to think differently, work differently, engage differently, look at the problem differently. Again, the ultimate objective is how do you generate more ideas and better ideas? So I'm going to share with you 5 that I use. Add them to your ideation toolkit. Pull them out as needed. And you should start collecting up and trying out different approaches, and whichever ones work best for you. It could be you and how you apply it. It could be the teams you're putting together. There might be better approaches and better tools to generate ideas depending on how the makeup of your team is. But you should collect up your own ideation toolkit, and I'm going to give you the 5 first tools beyond the traditional brainstorming. Now, if you do have your own ways, if you've been collecting up these tools on your own, I would love to hear about them. So share them over. You can post them over at theinnovators.community. That's the free community. It doesn't cost you anything. But that's the community where innovators from around the world kind of hang out, they post questions, propose ideas, look for people to have input ideas. Here's an opportunity for you to share your approach to generating ideas when you are pulling together individuals and trying to drive to an ideation session. So post them over at theinnovators.community, or you can just post them up on Twitter. Tag me in the tweet so that I can see the post. I'll comment on those. My Twitter handle is @PhilMcKinney, all one word, no spaces. So first up of the 5 new ways to generating ideas is mind mapping. Now, mind mapping is a fairly common term nowadays. Now, there are lots of software tools that are out there as far as how they get used and et cetera. They have templates. Now, traditionally, they're used to organize your data, your information, but they also happen to be a great way to generate ideas. So how do I use it? First up, I develop my problem statement. Now, you're probably getting tired of hearing me rant on this, but you need to spend the time to truly understand the problem. I'm going to quote Albert Einstein again. Albert Einstein's famous quote is if he was given 1 hour to save the world, he would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and then 5 minutes solving it. So you need to spend the time understanding and defining the problem. So assuming you've developed a good problem statement, write down that problem statement in the center of your idea. Now, you can do this on a piece of paper. You can do it in mind mapping software. I find putting it in the middle of a big, huge whiteboard works great when you've got, 8 to 10 people in the room. So again, write down the problem statement in the center of it. For example, a good problem statement, the one I'm always a big fan of, is John F. Kennedy's problem statement that says, before the end of the decade, we will put a man on the moon and return him home safely. It's his problem statement, BHAG, whatever term you want to use. So write whatever that is in the center. Then expand on the problem statement by surrounding it with items that better describe the problem. So, for instance, if the problem statement is John F. Kennedy's put the man on the moon, bring him home safely, you may, in a mind map, then start listing around the outside of the problem statement those other items, and one would be achieve escape velocity. How do I escape gravity to get past outside of Earth? How do I get into space? That would be another expanded definition or expanded item off of the problem statement. Now you would add, after you fill all those in, then you would add a second layer to each of those needs, describing how you might solve those individual challenges. So again, the problem statement being put a man on the moon, the expanded portion of that surrounding about what I need in order to achieve that problem statement or to solve that problem statement is I need to achieve escape velocity. I've got to escape Earth gravity, right? That's a problem. The next layer out are starting to do some solutions. One solution might be create a multi-stage rocket. So I've defined the problem. I've expanded that problem in the next layer of the mind map. And in the third layer of that mind map, I start doing those solutions. And then just keep adding to your mind map using the steps. Go through and put another layer in, build out the second layer, build out that third layer, until you've sufficiently broken down the problem into its manageable parts with a set of possible ideas. And then you can look at each of those ideas and rank them. How likely are you to be able to do that? Are they achievable? What do you don't know that you would have to go off and investigate? But it allows to have this kind of grouping exercise around this concept of mind mapping that I have found to be a pretty interesting approach. It is a fantastic ideation technique that encourages creative answers. It also supports kind of the whole concept of building upon the ideas of others. It could be a great homework exercise for a team prior to a traditional group ideation session. So you could have each person do their own mind map and then come together as a group and share their mind maps. Okay? So that's mind mapping. Number 2 is a process that I call wishing. Wishing encourages your team to let their imaginations run wild. Now, in traditional brainstorming, I hear a lot of facilitators and innovation leaders complain about, my team is out and they're doing, Buck Rogers kind of stuff. This is that session. I will hold a session that just says we're going to hold a wishing session and we're going to get together and we're going to go crazy with some of these crazy ideas. So, how's this done? One is assume you have a well-researched and understand problem statement. I know you're getting tired of hearing me say that. You ask each participant to dream up the most unattainable, extreme, impractical solutions they can think of related to the problem statement. Let them just go crazy. Now, you create the list. Each person is creating a list, maybe a few dozen wishes. Now, you go through the wishes by considering and discussing the ideas in detail with the aim of triggering new but more realistic concepts for you to go after. Now, this concept is I'm going to go way out there with the wishes, and then I'm going to bring the team back to say, from that wish, what is it we can practically do? So ask yourself, what makes that wish impossible? How could that idea be scaled down? Could I take a piece of it maybe? Which features could I integrate with another approach that we're thinking about? So letting them go ahead and go extreme with that wishes idea allows them to possibly open up entirely new areas, new ideas, things that you have just never considered. Now, when I've run wishing sessions, I've seen some of these ideas go to become really extreme, right? Look, I'll be the first person to sign up for transporter technology. Anything to avoid jet lag when traveling. But even those things such as jet lag, there are elements of that you could potentially deal with. So jet lag, why am I focused on jet lag? Because I hate long distance travel. I found as I've gotten older, my body just doesn't recover from long distance travel like it used to. So the objective is, my wish is transporter technology, but it may generate an idea of like, are there other ways to deal with the jet lag problem? And that may generate some other ideas about how to. And in fact, there's a company in Scandinavia who's been sending me to test these new kinds of glasses that have different color lights in them that are supposed to be helping with jet lag. And so, albeit I'd love transport technology, someone has come up with an idea around these kinds of glasses. So wishing is a good approach. You should feel free to give it a try. When we return from the break, I'm going to cover 3 more ways to generate ideas. And for you to add them to your ideation toolkit, I will be right back. Welcome back. When I was a preteen, I happened to stumble on a PBS broadcast, which happens to be Channel 11 in Chicago, where a person was in a studio showing, not just lecturing, but actually demonstrating to adults and kids how to improve their abilities to be creative and applying it to problem solving. The series was created by the BBC, rebroadcast here in the United States on PBS, and the host and instructor was Dr. Edward de Bono. I was hooked. It convinced me that I could be creative and that there were these tools and skills and abilities that Dr. de Bono was teaching that anybody and everybody could apply. The audience consisted of kids my age or even younger, all the way up to senior citizens, all working together. There was probably, 25 or 30 people in the audience. And it wasn't just sitting in a chair. They actually got up and used and practiced and applied what Dr. de Bono was teaching. I drove my parents nuts. I had to be home when the show was broadcast. I didn't care what they had on the plans. I would constantly remind them. If I recall correctly, I think it was like a Saturday afternoon kind of broadcast time. And my parents would like, well, don't you want to go out and play baseball? No. I got to be home. I got to watch this show. And I just drove them nuts. Back then, we didn't have a way to record it. We didn't own a VHS player yet. And, there was no such thing as a DVR. Now, years later, Dr. de Bono released his book, 6 Thinking Hats, which unleashed a new approach to generating ideas by breaking down ideas into 6 areas of thought. And this is the number 3 item that I want to share with you as far as new ways to generate ideas, which is Dr. de Bono's 6 Thinking Hats. Now, the whole purpose was to help participants put themselves in the shoes of another person, to look at the problem differently, to have a completely different perspective. So the 6 areas of thoughts are logic, optimism, devil's advocate, emotion, creativity, and management. And all of them have a different set of philosophies, approaches, etc. And as a result, they kind of force you to kind of act in a different way. So let me walk through those again. Logic, which happens to be blue, just a color that Dr. de Bono. And it's about the facts, only the facts. Facts that you know, facts that you can prove, facts that you can validate. Number 2 is optimism, which is yellow. In the case of optimism, it's about the value and the benefits, the upside, benefits of whatever this thing is, optimism. The black hat, which is devil's advocate, it's the difficulties and the dangers, it's the naysayers, it'll never work, it could cause harm, whatever it is. In the emotion, which happens to be red, it's about feelings and intuitions and your gut. The green hat, which is creativity, it's about possibilities and new ideas. Well, if this was the idea, wow, if we did this, we could even do it bigger. It's about that creativity, constantly looking at it differently. And the purple hat, which is management. And that is making sure that the rules of the hats are observed. So how do you use this tool? How do you take advantage of what Dr. de Bono's created? Have each member of your team put on one of these different hats for the discussion. You don't need the physical hats. There are actually companies out there that have taken this work and have actually created hats. So you've got people sitting on the table all with a different color hat. Don't have to go to that extreme. You can have them put on the virtual hat, right? But when they put that, quote, hat on, they're representing that. Now, each hat represents a unique set of priorities and perspectives that's going to help focus the discussion and consider the project from a wide range of perspectives. So, for example, if you are wearing the devil's advocate hat, it's your job to consider the project's limitations and challenges. Now, it may feel uncomfortable at first to basically temporarily adopt a very narrow form of thinking, but the extremes can help teams fully explore a project or an idea. Because remember, not everybody is wearing the devil's advocate hat. Some may be wearing the green creativity hat. Some may be wearing the yellow optimism hat, right? And so everybody's wearing a different hat. And then it becomes that perspective of following on those conversations and getting and challenging each other and forcing people to be able to look for both the positives and the optimism and look for the negatives in the devil's advocate. For instance, if you're wearing the creativity hat, your job is to throw out ideas and possibilities no matter what the others are saying. You're trying to get out there and generate more ideas and new ideas and better ideas. The key with the 6-hat approach is you want to make sure each person has their say. You want to be able to give everybody the floor. So even though you're telling someone to be a devil's advocate, if they are more of an introvert and they're not a challenging kind of personality, then you may have to draw them out. You may have to engage with them and say, "Hey, Bob, Sue, why don't you, what could go wrong with this idea? What are the risks of this idea? How could this idea not be successful?" You want to pull them out. You want to make sure that you get the input from all 6 perspectives, right? You want to be able to get everybody's view. That's the whole purpose. Is otherwise, if you have a group of people and they're all optimists, all you're going to hear is the optimism perspective. If everybody's a naysayer, all you're ever going to hear are the devil's advocates, people. Now, some of these are, obviously easier for people to play in, right? The creativity or the optimism. Devil's advocate can be tough on people to try to act that way or try to think that way. But again, it's also about building in mental agility to get people to think about a problem or solutions or ideas, not with just their normal thinking style, but to have enough mental agility in order to look at the problem completely differently. What I love is whenever I've used this tool, whoever the person is that gets logic, the blue hat, they have a hard time discerning what is really fact versus what their opinion is. And in the case of when you're in logic, it is about fact. It is not about opinion. That opinions and that falls into the emotions area, which is red, the red hat. That's feelings, that's intuitions, that's gut. Those are the 2 that I have seen when I've used this approach, where people get hung up on it between logic and emotion. And by calling people out on it, they kind of catch themselves and they recognize that sometimes when they try to convey something as fact, or it's not factual. So we've covered 3 ways to generate new ideas so far. When we come back from the break, I'm going to cover 2 more ways to generate ideas. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. So far, we've covered 3 new ways to generate ideas. These include mind mapping, wishing, and 6 thinking hats. Now, you may or may not have been aware of these. Some of these may not be totally new to you. Some of them you may have read about but have never tried. These last 2 that I'm going to share with you are a little bit more out there, so stay tuned. Here we go. Next up is what is called brain writing. Brain writing. Now, one challenge for generating ideas is to get everything that is rattling around in your head out. So how does brain writing work? In this exercise, each participant takes a piece of paper and writes down a rough idea for solving the problem statement. Now, each piece of paper is then passed on to someone else who reads it silently and adds their own ideas to the page, building upon the previous person's ideas. Now, this process is repeated until everyone has had a chance to add to each piece of paper. Once each participant has retrieved their original piece of paper, they read, they organize, they group the ideas that are on that piece of paper. Then each participant shares the notes and the ideas on their piece of paper with the broader group. So basically, everybody gets one piece of paper, starts writing down some of their early ideas related to the problem statement, and then that piece of paper gets passed around. When you get a piece of paper, you add on it, you build on it. And so therefore, if you have 8 people in your group, you have 8 pieces of paper floating around the group. And you want to make sure everybody has commented on every piece of paper. Now, the big advantage of brain writing is that it makes sure everyone is given the opportunity to have their thoughts and ideas thoroughly considered by the group, because as you pass the papers around, you see the other people's ideas. It also reinforces the idea of building on the ideas of others. You're looking at a problem statement. Everybody starts with the same problem statement, but what you may not even notice or comprehend at first is somebody took that problem statement and is going in a completely different direction, something you hadn't thought about, but that triggers an idea from you and you build on that person's ideas. So as a result, you get this yes and, oh wow, that's a great idea. And if we did this, it would be even better. So it reinforces this idea of building on the ideas of others. It also avoids the loudest and most extroverted people in the group of unintentionally dominating the session, dominating the conversation. Now, brain writing is one that's pretty simple. You can run it in a pretty quick session. It doesn't require a whole lot of prep other than having a well-researched, well-thought-out problem statement. But it actually works pretty well. It's more of a silent kind of an exercise, except at the end when people are sharing. And when people are sharing, then people are going to naturally say, well, hell, we got something just like that or similar to that on our piece of paper. And at the end, you may want to take sticky notes and take and combine up ideas and put them up on a flip chart someplace so you get them all captured. You can capture all the pieces of paper afterwards to collect up the ideas. Again, my key advice would be is don't just do the piece of paper and then share it. Rank them. Figure out which ones get the best ideas. You don't have to go through a whole criteria ranking. You can just do dot ranking. If you're not familiar with what I'm saying when I talk about criteria ranking or dot ranking, go over and listen to the episode called Disruptive Ideation, and that explains some of the exercises specifically around criteria ranking and dot ranking. So you can just do a quick dot ranking of the ideas, and as a result of that, then you can come back with the best ideas. Okay. The last way to generate ideas I wanted to share is one I've used with my product teams back when I was CTO at Hewlett Packard. Now, the premise is to look at non-logical combinations to create entirely new ideas. For example, the idea of combining a feature phone. For those of you not as old as me, yes, starting off in the cell phone industry, we had feature phones, flip phones. But the idea of combining a feature phone with a PDA to make a smartphone, those two combinations is what Palm created when they created the very first of the generations of smartphones. What this process is called, it's called forced combinations. Forced combinations. Now, this exercise involves bringing together ideas that serve very different needs or interests. The objective is to form entirely new concepts. Now, you see this sort of thinking all the time in products like the Apple Watch, where you're putting together all kinds, it's a watch, but it's also now can measure your EKG. We've seen now watches that have that, plus they can actually take your blood pressure on your wrist. It's these combinations that you just normally wouldn't think of. So it applies to things like the Apple Watch, a Swiss Army knife, or even sofa beds. So how does this work? First off, bring a bag of random items to your ideation session. The crazier, the better. In some cases, I would actually bring other kinds of consumer electronic devices that had no relation to, PCs or laptops. Whatever it is, you want to kind of challenge the team to think differently. Now, draw 2 lists side by side of the items in the bag. Ask a team member to pick 2 or more items and explore different ways they could be combined. Take product, item A and item B. You look at them. What could you imagine if these things came together? Okay. Now on the list, you draw a line between each combination. So if you had a laptop and a badminton racket, draw those together. What could you come up with? And you force people. They just can't do it and say, I can't come up with anything. Let's go on to the next item. You want them to exercise. You want them to stretch their minds a little bit. Once that person's done and they've shared a bunch of different ideas, write those down on that chart. If you draw a line between 2 items, write right there on that what were the ideas that came up with it. Put the items back in the bag. Next person selects 2 or more items and repeats the process. Now, this technique will produce some silly results, but it's ultimately helpful, that way of getting the teams out of their creative rut. And you never know what will come of it. Trust me, I've come up with some pretty crazy ideas. So we're now covered the 5 new ways of generating ideas. They are mind mapping, wishing, 6 hats, brainwriting, and forced combinations. Give them a try. I'd love to hear about your results. And also, don't think you need to use it the exact same way I described them in order for them to work. It's not a rule book. Experiment. Be willing to try new and different ways to generate ideas. Look, you're taking the time to listen to me. You are obviously committed to improving your creativity, your ability to generate ideas. Get creative. Come up with new ways to help yourself and your teams to generate more and better ideas. That is the whole purpose. It's why I'm here. It's why I've been sitting behind a microphone for 14, going on 15 years now with this show, sharing at least my perspectives on what has worked and what hasn't worked, or what is working, or the challenges I'm facing as I've shifted and moved around in my career. If you're taking the time to listen, you want to be more creative. Here's your chance. I've given you 5 ways. There are literally thousands of ways to generate new ideas. And don't think that you just got to go, buy a book like Thinker Toys, which if you don't own a copy of Thinker Toys, you definitely should go buy it. It's one of the best books out there, listing all kinds of ways and approaches to generate new ideas. You should go do that. But come up with your own. Come up with ones that work with your team. Have fun with it. You think of it as a combination of team building and brainstorming. Okay, don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, I have a new 5 minutes to new ideas to share with you. This one was a lot of fun to work on and write and research, so you're not going to want to go anywhere. So again, we'll be right back after this break. Don't forget to check out the show notes. Well, we will be posting the instructions I've shared with you in today's show. So if you weren't able to catch all the notes, you're driving in your car or whatever, don't worry. You can just hop on over to killerinnovations.com and search for this show, and you'll have all the show notes, all the instructions, everything on how to apply it to your teams. And again, go out, give it a try, experiment, play around, and let me know how it works. Give me some feedback, okay? I'll be right back right after this quick break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal, team, or organization's innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners just like you, we've decided to bring it back, with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas. It's designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself, your business, and your products and services by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 Minutes to New Ideas. When I was growing up, one time my grandmother baked a fantastic German chocolate cake. I can see it now. That moist chocolate cake and rich icing, it was great, and everybody in the family let her know how great it was. We devoured the cake. But from that time on, we could count on German chocolate cake as the dessert every time we would visit. It became a little boring. Needless to say, I never told her that. Everybody wants and needs change. But on the other hand, we enjoy doing what we do well that has been reinforced by others expressing their appreciation. We all have experienced applauding a small child, or in my case, grandchildren's performance. Perhaps it was a somersault or a dance, only to have the child repeat it over and over again until we could jump up and run out of the room screaming. We as adults are no different. We tend to limit ourselves to the things we learn to do well. It's easier for one thing, and it beats the risk of trying something new. When it comes to innovation, this plays out in spades. When a new innovation team achieves success, such as creation of a new product or service, they jump to the assumption that it was the process that enabled them to achieve success. Or maybe it was the way that one brainstorming session was run, and therefore, all future brainstorming sessions should be done the exact same way. Or maybe it was the evaluation and the idea selection process that was key for its success. So therefore, all future idea evaluations should be done in the exact same way. Just as the enthusiastic applause for a child puts a child on auto-repeat, success to an innovation team does the same. We create a habit of repeating the exact same steps in what we believe is the perfect innovation process. When that happens, it's the first indication that an innovation team is on the glide path to mediocrity. It was not the process that enabled success, it was the idea. And building a rigid, repetitive process are not conducive to creating a stimulating environment for generating new and exciting ideas. It's easy to fall into uninteresting grooves of habit, and the only way to avoid it, to keep change and creativity in our lives, is to do it deliberately. To achieve sustained innovation success, it's a good idea to break up the patterns from time to time. It will stimulate you and your team, resulting in new, fresh outlook on things. Remember, no habit has any real hold on you other than the hold you have on it. Habits and routines have a way of sneaking up on us. It starts off with us finding a way of doing things that become easily repeatable, comfortable. And soon it becomes a way, just the way we innovate. Samuel Johnson in 1784 put habit in its right context. Quote, "The chains of habit are too weak to be noticed until they are too strong to be broken." End quote. Be on guard to avoid the habit trap. Innovation is about being disruptive. So disrupt how you do everything, including how you innovate. If you can apply innovation to products, services, sales, marketing, HR, finance, why not innovate the way you innovate? Turn the habit mirror on yourself. Look, we are quick to criticize expense report processes for being too rigid and in need of innovation. Could others say the same about your innovation framework and processes? Does this mean you need to change your innovation frameworks and processes after each project? No. What it does mean is to be deliberate in trying new things. Do not allow the feeling of the safe to hold you back from taking risks. There are some things you would like to leave as is, but German chocolate cake for every dessert or something else gets old and boring fast. We need a change in our lives. It's a basic human need. If we don't get it, the concrete starts to harden. We need to be willing to change ourselves first and through it, influence others that changes what is needed if we are to keep moving forward. Now, most people who drive cars to work leave at the exact same time, follow the exact same route, and have the exact same thing for breakfast every day. And then they arrive on the job and they continue that routine. So start tomorrow. Have something different for breakfast. Leave earlier and take a different route to work. You may see something that could spark a great idea and also see some interesting parts of the town or the countryside. We all can do things to get ourselves out of our own ruts and avoid the habit trap. I'm Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Beyond this show, I write about my personal experiences of being in the innovation game for the last 2 decades. Topics include innovation, creativity, culture, team building, metrics, frustrations, leadership, and how to win. You can find that content over at philmckinney.com. You can also find out information about my book, Beyond the Obvious, including extensive excerpts over at beyondtheobvious.com. You can find hardcover, digital, and audio versions of my book on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. This episode of Killer Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.